Blog Talk Radio.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Inside the Football Business with Neil Stratton and Justin VanFulpen as we go inside the business of football. Today we're to have many different topics that we're going to get into, so let's get into the show. Neil, how's it going, man?
It's great, man. Calling in from Scottsdale, Arizona today, and it is beautiful out here and a little chilly, but that's okay. Chilly's better than hot, and so we're kind of enjoying the weather and the surroundings and everything else. I'm here at the 2015 Sports Financial Advisors Association Conference. It's the first one they've ever had, and there are probably 40 or 50 people from around the business who are here to talk about how to make clients and how to improve service, and most of all, how to educate the people in the NFL, the young people who seem to be making mistakes consistently, on how to not make those mistakes.
Gotcha. And kind of give our listeners a little bit about what you had saw there and kind of the format that went on there during that conference there.
Well, they've had a chance to hear from experts across the industry on how to repair credit, how not to get into trouble with credit, how to protect your brand, how to network, how to build a company, what to do and what not to do, how to register, tax issues, almost anything you can think of from a business standpoint for people who are in the game, who want to be in the game, or who have a service to offer to players that are looking to what's going to happen next after the game, after they're done playing. And again, this was all started by a guy named Jonathan Miller, who's a CPA here in the Phoenix area, and just really has an interest in trying to educate players so that they don't all turn up on the next edition of Broke, on 30 for 30. I mean, I think everyone across the business has seen that show, and it's kind of on the tip of their tongue, and we've all seen the stories and heard the excesses of some players and how they burn through their money, and it doesn't have to be that way. Now, there are a lot of things that are part, of young athletes and their mentality and the volatility of the game and the business that lend themselves to making bad decisions and maybe decisions that are in the moment. And for that reason, you hear about all the statistics on players going bankrupt and losing their fortunes, losing their houses, and all those kinds of things almost immediately after they leave the league. And so I think the goal here is to try to end that, or at least reduce that number and reduce the damage that people are doing to their checkbooks, to their finances. So that's kind of why we're all here, with that shared goal, and we're all kind of just talking, conferring, hearing presentations, what have you, on the business and how to improve that and try to make that less of a problem. And so hopefully we'll get that done. In the meantime, it's a lot of fun. It's a great setting. We're at the McCormick Resort, which is beautiful. I mean, I'm looking right now kind of at a lake out here, and unfortunately it's a little too cold to swim in the pool, but that's okay. It's, like I say, it's really nice, and it's just a beautiful place out here. We've really chosen a great venue for it.
Yeah, if people want to know, that the website is sportsfinancial.org. In regards to the Sports Financial Advisory Association there. And we do see a lot of, situations with the financial advisors, a lot of different issues, that come up there, even with, people that are NFLPA, certified or, by the Players Association. That is one thing that, as a, NFLPA contract advisor, you're not allowed to recommend anybody that's not certified with the NFL Players Association there in their financial advisory program. Is that something
exactly.
that they talked about there at the conference there in regards to that distinguishing there of the NFLPA financial advisory program that they have there?
The NFLPA program really hasn't been something that has been a real part of of their presentations, and now it has come up in conversation. There are a number of financial planners who are part of that that have that certification, but it hasn't been like a formal part of it. And the NFLPA's program has some controversy to it. Obviously, not everyone is real excited about it. There have been a lot of people that have gotten into the program and gotten out of it. But again, that's kind of been outside the the topic level here, I guess, out here. But I think a lot of the people that are in the program maybe feel like it's a good program. It certainly gives them the ability to be recommended by agents, as you alluded to. At the same time, there have been a number of people who have defrauded info players. Many of them were part of the program. So is the vetting being done correctly? That's probably beyond the scope of what we're talking about today, but it is certainly a topic of conversation because it is controversial, and there are people that are very frustrated that more isn't being done and kind of wondering why they got the certification if the problem still exists. So, again, that's a highly controversial issue and probably something that's not going to go away anytime soon.
Yeah, and I think definitely it's something that, should be, addressed, and because, basically NFLPA says, hey, you're, even if you have the certification, we're not endorsing you. And I think that's where, people, kind of get the misconception, especially, hey, if you're, an agent and somebody who's a good, financial advisor who you trust, who you, have a rapport with, and they're not part of the program, well, if you recommend your client, to that player, you're going to get, have an issue with the Players Association.
Absolutely.
And, and hey, is that something that's the most beneficial, for the player and, there? And I disagree with, with that. I don't think that, hey, we're saying, hey, everything is, has to run through the NFLPA. That's going to be beneficial, for the player there. There's plenty of competent, good people, out there who aren't part of that program. And like you said, there's people who've been in that program that has defrauded, players, and I think that's the issue. You see the guys who, there's a guy who's in a situation that's been down there at the NFL Combine, a lot of people, know that there's been different, scenarios that's played out there, and that's the sad, part of that, and that part of that business, and obviously, the financial security and what those advisors do, that's a lot important. And what I don't think is that the athlete takes as much time to vet a financial advisor that they do an agent, and I think that's even more important than the agent. The agent's there to make your money, to try to grow as far as your dollars while you're playing, your endorsements and different things like that. That advisor there has a ton of more access to your future in regards to your long-term growth of your money, and you should be that watchdog of, hey, you're spending and different things like that. And I think there's too many yes men in that financial advisory business because they want the client, they need to gather that asset, they're in a big wirehouse there, and there's not enough of, hey, doing right, by the client. And I think the players therefore don't do enough vetting, of the financial advisor that they'll do. They'll sit down with multiple, agents and talk about that, but when it kind of comes to the financial advisor, they put it off, and then it's just kind of, it's whether it's a locker room talk or it's kind of a secondary thing for them, and I think it should be a bigger part of that. And I know it's hard to kind of put the cart before the horse in regards to, hey, I don't have any money now, but once you get it, it's there's so much going on. It's such a fast-paced thing in regards to, hey, how you're going to be able to get there. If you look at the pension program and the 401k, once you've had 2 active games, the NFL automatically enrolls you into the 401k plan. So basically, every rookie, that hits their 3rd game, if they were on the active roster, for the first 2 games, they're already in that 401k plan. And and not there's a ton of money. I think it's a 17.5, max this year, for them, but that's something where I think the players need to do a little bit better, and the agents need to try to help their clients that way. But it does, with the NFLPA restricting them, it does them restrict the agent from really trying to help them, because they only have so many guys there, and you probably know the numbers much better than I do in regards to, I don't think there's that number in regards to financial advisor. Is it 500? Is it that are certified with the NFLPA? I don't. I mean, that number kind of roundabout where that is?
I think 500 is a little north of where it is now. I think it used to be 500, 600 when the program was reinitiated a couple of years ago. It certainly was over 500 when the program was first installed in 04, 05, whatever that time frame was. They took it offline for 2 or 3 years after there were so many abuses that they didn't catch, and they were exposed to litigation. That's a whole other discussion. But yeah, you're right. There are a lot of people that are part of the program. There probably should be more that are part of the program. It probably should be a little better regulated and done a little bit better. Obviously they've got a lot of leverage because someone like yourself as an agent can't recommend anyone who's not part of the program. And that's why so many agents just get out of it entirely. And it's too bad because, Justin, you've seen a lot of people out there that are really abusing it. And, I mean, I'm thinking of a guy right now. I know that when I go to the All-Star games, during the January cycle, I'm going to see him at every game. He's always dressed flashy. He always, really puts across an aura of, hey, I've got money and I can help you find money. And if anyone goes on broker check, they'll find that this guy has been a disgrace. I mean, across the business, he's left a burning trail everywhere he's gone. And, it is sad. It just continues to perpetuate itself. I mean, I get kind of passionate about this, and a lot of people do, because so many players just walk right into these traps. It's like the trap sitting out in the middle of something, and somehow players still walk right into it. And that's distressing. That's disappointing. And, again, that's why they're having something like this. Another point you made, Justin, about vetting financial planners because the players don't have money yet. They spend so much time trying to find their agent. And I understand because they see the agent as a vehicle to getting into the game. Once they're in the game, man, you better find a financial planner pretty quick because you got a lot of money coming in. You don't want to there's worse things, I guess, than just having it sitting in a checking account or what have you. But if you really want to put it to work for you, and you may not, and the life expectancy of an NFL player is pretty short, you better find someone pretty quickly that you can trust and that can do something that's going to, move the football for you. No pun intended. So it's a mini splendid thing. It's got a lot of facets to it. It's kind of a crazy discussion or argument. There's a lot to know. And again, we're not going to, slay any giants out here, but at least we can kind of get started on figuring out what needs to be done. And hopefully more agents will become part of that discussion because it's such a critical area.
Yeah, if you look at kind of here online, looking here online in regards to the kind of the topics, just for our listeners that Neil's out there and being a part of, it's life and disability insurance for the athlete, tax updates, estate planning updates, psychology of money and the athlete, venture capital and angel investing, franchising and starting a business, branding and protecting your brand, and liability protection, for the athlete there. So definitely some interesting, topics, something that, definitely is, could be used more. Do you see, as far as the guys that you're out there and talking and kind of the business of football and the business of dollars and financial advisory, aspect of it, do you see something, this becoming a growth standpoint? Where do you see, something like this obviously, going?
Well, this is the first conference they've ever had, so they're just kind of right now putting their stakes in the ground. I'm hoping that it will expand, but there are some pretty reputable, pretty big-name people from around the business that are here, and there are some former NFL players here that are very passionate about it and that want to grow this and make it into something different. And so I'm excited about the direction it's going, but only time will tell really what kind of effect it has. And one thing that they're working on is a documentary called Beyond the Game that's very similar in tone to the 30 for 30 episode of Broke that I referenced earlier that hopefully everyone's seen or at least heard of. And they talked to Mike Ditka, and they talked to Ricky Williams, and they talked to Kyle Turley, and they talked to a number of players who've seen the excesses and many times been victimized themselves. So all you can do is kind of try to put the word out and educate as much as possible and hope that people are listening. But it's such a difficult environment. Players are influenced by so many different people, some who have their best interests in mind, some who don't, that that there's going to be more and more players that are victimized, and that's too bad. And so hopefully at some point we'll get traction and things will turn around. One of the things that's frustrating to me, Justin, and I know you know this, it kind of touched on what we discussed earlier, there are a lot of good financial planners out there who just can't get access to players. they're honest, they're very knowledgeable, they could be a tremendous value add, but for whatever reason they can't find a way to the players, and there's not really a clear vehicle for that unless you kind of know some tricks of the trade and know how to network and know where you need to be and kind of where to make those introductions. That's what I'll be addressing today, is talking about how you kind of get the golden key, so to speak, into how to talk to players and where to reach them and what to say to them when you do reach them and all those kind of things. That's a hard thing. And I know you probably get solicited all the time, Justin, by financial planners who are trying to get a piece of the action, who want to try to get in and meet players, what have you. I mean, I'm always told by my agent clients that they want to get off LinkedIn because all they ever do is get solicitations from financial planners. Has that been your experience as well?
Oh yeah, definitely. Especially early in my career, you'd have 3 or 4 guys contact you on almost on a weekly basis. There in regards to try and hey, what's the best way? They want to sit down and pick your brain. And what I've always told those guys is that hey, there's a time and a place for the financial advisor to kind of get in there. But and I think sometimes they think that hey, it's they got to get in there early and different things like that. But and they've got to do the same type of recruiting that that the agent does. And there's a lot of financial advisors that do that recruiting aspect there. I think sometimes the financial advisors think that the key to the window is through the agent, but with the regulations of the NFLPA, you've got to be real careful, and then you don't want to recommend guys there. And what I've told some of my clients is, hey, let's take the guys who contact you and we'll vet them. We'll vet them together and we'll figure it out. So hey, and that's a way then to continue to respect the NFLPA's wishes. Is that hey, I'm not recommending anybody, and and that's where I think the issue is because you as an agent have to have such kid gloves on that where you don't want to you don't want to cross and violate any of the rules there, but then you're not really helping your client to your best of ability. So I think that's where the dynamics kind of come in there. Now, hey, if those rules weren't in place where you could recommend, then you could sit down and you could have those conversations with those financial advisors and say, okay, hey, this is the best guy, and then be able to do a service for your client and say, hey, this is the guy I recommend there. But you can't do that because so many of the financial advisors aren't involved in that program, and some of those financial advisors don't believe in that program because it doesn't do anything for them. It's it's a dollar making there for the NFL PA. But it doesn't provide any value. It's not there's no stamp of approval. The NFLPA even on their thing says we're not endorsing this financial advisor. Well then what does it matter? I think that's the biggest thing there. It's what does it matter? And I think that's where that's where the conversation's got to change with the NFLPA. I don't think it ever will. I mean, like you said, they brought it in, and then they took it out, and then they've brought it back, and they've but hey, why let's worry about the SEC and FINRA and all those other regulatory bodies. They do enough in regards to hey, licensing these guys and tracking these guys and different things like that. And they're putting the stamp of approval on it. Then the NFLPA, you guys, kind of let the regulatory bodies that do that for a living, let them, take care of that.
Right. Yeah. I tell you what, Justin, it's so frustrating. I mean, you're an agent, I'm not, but it's such a dichotomy. You spend all this time developing a relationship with a kid, trying to, put his best interest at hand, trying to do everything you can. And he comes to trust you, and he comes to know that and know that you're there for him. And then when it comes to maybe the next most important decision he can make, which is who's going to handle his money, you essentially have to withdraw from the process, unless you're going to recommend someone who's part of the program. And you may not know those people that are in the program. Some you might not. So, and as we both know, and there are many qualified guys that know money inside and out, and even know and have several NFL clients who aren't part of that program. So you can't even recommend them either. So it's just, what a paradox. And, I mean, it's almost you can make the argument that the NFLPA has done more harm than good by, certifying these certain financial planners, because there's no real evidence to suggest that they're any safer with a player's money than anyone else out there. So it's really difficult. I think the main thing is, for those people who don't know, there is a body out there called FINRA, and they have a feature called Broker Check, and you can go in and run anyone through that, and you're able to know what kind of certifications they have and what kind of problems they've had with clients in the past. And it's certainly not perfect, because there are a lot of people out there who handle money and call themselves financial planners who have no certifications and no clients even, but they can call themselves that. And if they don't register with FINRA, then they just won't show up at all. It's not they'll have a black mark next to their name. They just won't be on there. So nothing's perfect, but at least you have some guidance if you know about that website, and you know a couple of the tricks of the trade and kind of the things like that. But it is very frustrating and quite vexing that someone like you, who had a player drafted last year, you can't even walk in and be part of the process of the vetting the financial people unless it's within strict guidelines that NFLPA sets forth, and those may not be the best guidelines.
Yeah, for sure. And it's definitely a topic that a lot of people are interested in, and obviously that's one reason why you're out there in Arizona. And kind of like you said, you mentioned that you have some presentations about how in regards to financial advisors and how that they can kind of the tricks of the trade and different things like that. You kind of you have our listeners obviously that are out there, kind of a brief highlights of kind of your presentation here in a couple hours and kind of what you're going to go over. Well,
I mean, it's all going to be filmed. I'm not sure if it's going to be on the Sports Financial Advisors website, or where it's going to be, what kind of format it'll be, what kind of platform it'll be. But I'm going to essentially be talking about what to do and what not to do when you're trying to reach out to people in the game, and that's players, that's other people that you might be able to help, agents, what have you. It's kind of about networking in the game, and again, I'm focusing primarily on reaching out to players, but I think I could probably do another full presentation on what financial planners should do and shouldn't do when it comes to talking to agents. And again, we've touched on that a bit here. I'm sure you've got some horror stories about guys that just wouldn't kind of say no. I mean, wouldn't take no for an answer and wouldn't leave you alone. And that's pretty commonplace across the industry, because it's my feeling that the NFLPA kind of pushes their financial planners to say, hey, go out and find a good agent and buddy up to him and wine him and dine him, and he'll give you all his players. And that's not realistic, and probably not even a sound game plan or a sound strategy for him. So anyway, I'll be talking more about how financial planners can find the players out there and how they can kind of begin a dialogue with them. To me, the best way to do that is going through the All-Star process. I mean, that's a nice, easy way. The players are there. They're somewhat vetted. I mean, they've been identified as prospects. Combine's a lot harder. I call the Combine kind of a football party that's by invitation only, whereas the All-Star games are more of a football party where there's a lot more access. And then, I guess there are other places, but those are kind of the two that are in the forefront of most people's minds. And, obviously there are ways you can cold call and you can reach out to players and kind of go through the schools and those kind of things, but those are the ones I think are most visible. So I'll be focusing primarily on those two areas, the All-Star games and the Combine.
Gotcha, and definitely, we'll talk more about this as it gets up there, and I'm sure it'll be in Succeed in Football. I'll definitely get it up there on Football Next Level, my blog there, and I've talked about financial advisors. One post that I had there, and was able to then get that out to the players, as well as agents and different things like that in regards to why the process needs to be there in regards to finding a good financial advisor. Obviously, Ballers, HBO, Dwayne The Rock Johnson, he plays a former NFL player turned financial advisor. There was a big kind of hit on HBO. It's going on season 2. They're actually filming right now for season 2 of Ballers there, with Dwayne The Rock Johnson there as portraying a former NFL player as a financial advisor. So good stuff. People are, that was kind of, talking to players, even, like Trevor that you mentioned had gotten drafted, all those guys, kind of watch that. So that's something that, hey, maybe that kind of comedy drama, maybe can bring some more light to the, financial advisors and finding, a good one there. Obviously, like you said, the All-Star Game process, when I was involved in there, we'd always have a, financial advisor that would be a sponsor kind of for the talk. I think that's something where, hey, financial advisors can get to, the players as well as, get to network with the agents there. The NFLPA does put on that, hey, if you're part of the financial advisor program, you go to an event there with agents. Usually it's on the West Coast. I know last year it was there in Las Vegas. It's a 2-day, event, that goes on there. So, and definitely a lot of the business aspect of things is wrapped up in those, as far as financial advisors. It's a great topic. It's a great topic for us to talk about here on Inside the Football Business, something that we'll continue to do as we get through there. So, what obviously you got a couple of minutes here, left here on the show. It's been a great show. It's something that people, hopefully agents, financial advisors can get on here and listen, as well as players and parents and different things like that. Kind of last couple of minutes, there we saw, it's kind of just news and notes. We saw Tom Lewan and Martin Mayhew, get fired from the Detroit Lions. Tom Lewan, the president of the Lions, and Martin Mayhew, the GM there. So we're seeing some, comings and goings of, the personnel departments there. We've had coaches fired. So definitely, as we kind of get into this cycle, we'll see, kind of new blood bring into the NFL. There. So kind of 3 minutes left here. What's any news and notes, anything, what's going on inside the league, anything that we kind of, what you want to, touch before we get off the air?
Well, just addressing what you just mentioned, I think it's real interesting because we talk about trends on the show. And in the old days, if a GM was going to be let go, he wasn't let go until after the draft. In the old days, if a head coach is going to be let go, it almost always was after the season. You kind of let these guys play things out. That's over. I mean, getting rid of a GM and a president in mid-season is fascinating to me. I mean, to me that shows that there's anger in the organization. Whereas the Lions used to be arguably the most patient team in the league when it came to making changes. I mean, gosh, how long was Matt Millen there? It's amazing how the Lions had really long ropes for people, but those days apparently are over. And to make a major shift mid-season like this, that essentially puts Jim Caldwell on notice that he could be gone, I don't know. That's a big story to me, and a major shift in the paradigm. And so we'll see what happens. I mean, I guess they're going to be angling to hire somebody at season's end to replace Mayhew and to replace Lewan. And where that could come from is hard to tell. I mentioned yesterday on Inside the League in our post when we discussed this, they don't have any kind of sports analytics and metrics person on staff. I could see them bringing someone in from outside that does that, maybe to take the team in a different direction. The only thing that I've been able to gather, and I've spoken to every scout that I know trying to gather information on this, no one seems to know anything. But the one thing I have heard is they're going to bring someone in from the inside who doesn't have any ties to the Lions and kind of set a new course, I guess. So there could be a whole lot of scouts that are on the street after the draft, and maybe even sooner. Again, if we're changing paradigms here, then maybe they're going to get rid of guys even sooner than that, especially if they're going to lean on the coaches when it comes to the vetting process and identifying the players that they want to make 2016 draft class. So interesting things going on in the Motor City.
Oh yeah, definitely. And hey, one playoff there for Martin Mayhew kind of sealed his fate. Being able to go 1-7, lost some players there that were kind of big time there. So definitely, like I said, interesting things going on in Motor City. Always a great show, Neil. Have a great time out there in Scottsdale, Arizona. We'll look forward to kind of your post there, the video that you had mentioned in regards to on the Sports Financial Advisory Association website. Hopefully, more things coming in as far as with the Inside the League. Great stuff there. Always a great show here. So as we get farther here into November, working our way towards the NFL draft, we'll always got you covered with all the breaking news here inside the football business. Have a great time, Neil, and we'll talk to you soon.
Great. Thanks, Justin. Talk to you next time, buddy.